we have been doing our presentations on Zoom, and we've switched over to Teams. So I've got a little bit, I'm doing it all on my own, which I'm quite excited about, but I have a little bit of a learning curve. Okay, so again, thanks, Bailey. So I wanted to start off by talking about why choose infection prevention. And there's a couple of really valuable things in here. Number one is there is some urgency to bring and build on the team players for infection prevention. And that's largely because there's a pending reduction in the IP workforce over the next 5 years because of aging out. So a lot of us who have been in this for a long time are coming towards the end of our career. And I think it's about 63% of infection preventionists will be retiring in the next 5 years. So it's really important to be bringing in that new talent and getting them up and qualified and competent as we start having this big transition of IPs moving out of the profession. I plan on sticking around for a while, but just keep an eye on that happening and know that that provides some job security too. There's also an increase in demand for infection preventionists, not only because of the big push that we're doing for long-term care, but also infection prevention is becoming popular outside of the traditional healthcare settings. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I've stayed in infection prevention for a number of reasons, the rewards of it. And that's, some of those are infection prevention is really essential for quality health care. It's high value care. So it's really focused on safety, not only of patients, but staff. And when infection prevention is done well, it really serves to protect the financial resources of the institution that you work for. It has offered me an opportunity to broaden my influence from, the patients that I took care of when I was bedside to the healthcare providers that I worked with when I started in an infection prevention role. So that broadened influence is appealing to me. There are varied opportunities for growth and development as you perfect your skill as an infection preventionist. And they've impacted me both personally and professionally. There's job security, as I mentioned, and also the financial compensation is good. I think the average IP salary right now is around $80,000. So it's, we do well. Sorry. I just threw up this word salad, and these are important components of infection prevention. I have the highlighted one as build relationships because I really believe that relationship piece of it is important as we build trust and transparency and collaboration with our partners that we're working with. And I want to start by talking about your professional development. So I see that we have a number of IPs here from the healthcare hospital setting. I see a few of you from long-term care, and a couple of people from the health departments. I know some are away at a conference. But essentially, an infection prevention career can be whatever you want it to be. I don't know how you came to this. Sometimes maybe you were told that you're going to be the infection preventionist. Maybe you were asked to do it, and maybe you were like me and you wanted to do it. So it's important to kind of have that long view and know where you want to get to, but also to be very intentional in regards to your career, your profession, and how you get from here to wherever it is that you want to be. So a lot of that is about adopting a systematic process for your professional growth and learning to take advantage of the educational resources and opportunities that are available. The one that I mentioned at the beginning, that if you haven't gotten your hands on this, I strongly recommend you do. It's a really important map for your career, and I'll send out a link, but it is APIC's Infection Prevention Career Development and Advancement Guidance Guide. It's like about 50 pages, and it has each stage and a whole host of other resources and information as you develop your roadmap. For those of you who are new, there is a really nice resource called the Roadmap for the Novice IP. If you're not an infection prevention, an APIC member, it's $500. If you are, it's free. I downloaded it and had a look, and it's got a lot. It's got tax skills. The very beginning of it has a checklist that you can go through and basically tick off as you build relationships with key stakeholders within your organization. So it's actually a really nice tool. The other thing I think I wanted to highlight here as a very important document is the APIC self-assessment tool. And it has the 8 domains that are part of the national certification exam. So that's very helpful. And it in the second column here, it talks about what are those specific practice areas that are identified through the text and we are tested on. And then how you rate yourself in that third column in your strength versus weakness. And then in the last column, this is where you actually can start to be specific about, I have a weakness here in this particular domain or area, and here's what I would like to do in order to strengthen that weakness. And at the end, it goes through the professional development domains. There are 6 of those. So it's a really nice informative. I think it's about a 6-page document. And you can grow this as you go. So you can start at one point and say, I want to learn more about sterilization and disinfection. So I'm going to review the HICPAC documents, but the next step might be that I want to spend some time in sterile processing. So it's a really nice way to track your progress. So then once you know where you are on the journey, maybe you're an infection paraprofessional, maybe you're proficient, maybe you're an infection prevention leader, but you need to know where you are if you want to know where you're going to go, right? So this is where you really want to start thinking about designing your path forward. I like to call it be future oriented. So, think about where you are, and maybe you were told you want to be an infection, you were going to do an infection prevention role in your organization. You think you'll stay in for a few years. You want to get proficient and learn some of those skills, but that's as far as you want to go. Or maybe you want to be an IP leader in the future. This actually will help you to lay that out. So the first, and I'm going to go through each of these, but we start as paraprofessionals maybe, or we start as novice and becoming proficient. Then we become proficient, which is typically when we become certified, either long-term care CIP or CIC certified. And then we continue to develop our knowledge and expertise to become an expert, a leader, or an executive IP. The APIC competency model helps to understand the infection prevention domains that are expected as we grow into this position, these roles. It outlines the progression of that skill and expertise and provides direction for you from the entry place on that path through your professional progression. And that supports those 6 domains. So those domains are your infection prevention and control program operations, quality improvement, which is a very important partner in infection prevention, because once you identify problems, how are you going to improve the quality of care? And they're the ones that really have a tremendous body of information on how to do that effectively. Informatics wasn't so important when I first entered infection prevention, but is really foundational and critical to infection prevention now, our information technology. Leadership skills, how do we develop those? How are we doing as professional stewards of infection prevention? And then also getting involved in research projects. So that's the APIC competency model. So I'm going to start and go through these different stages of career development. So the first is the IP paraprofessional, and this is entry level, and they work under the direction of an IP to support that IPC's, the infection preventionists practice. I believe if I were in a facility, I would want an IP paraprofessional, for instance, in long-term care, where as an IP, I might have half of my time dedicated to infection prevention in my facility. But that facility has 3 different distinct operations, right? There's the Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30 or whatever that normal hours are. Then the second facility is the evening and night shift. And then the third is the weekends. So being able to influence infection prevention practice on all those 3 facilities, even if it's in a hospital, is important that you have others that are trusted and competent on those off shifts to support your infection prevention program. So this is where I would want to be bringing people in. Some example competencies for a paraprofessional would be someone who would assist with surveillance duties, outbreak investigations, doing assessments of the care environment, and maybe participating in or doing rounds on the off shift. They might do some compliance monitoring, like hand hygiene, PPE donning and doffing. They may do a little data collection, and but all supervised. And then also work as a little bit of a mouthpiece for when you're not there as to what key infection prevention practices we really need to be following. The next stage is the novice and becoming proficient IP. And this is where I was when I started, because I wasn't sure of what I was doing. I didn't have a good, hadn't built that real proficiency yet. So I was very reliant on rules and concepts to guide practice. And that's typical as we develop that knowledge and skill. And we also begin to increase our collaboration to support IP strategies. We cannot do this alone. Our jobs really, especially in a healthcare system or a hospital, a larger organization, is really to be the facilitator of infection prevention practice. And we can't do it all. So bringing in the head of housekeeping, bringing in pharmacy for stewardship, bringing in your nurse leaders to support you with these efforts is really important. Some example competencies for becoming proficient and novice are then, again, assistance, but taking more on with it. Surveillance, outbreak investigation, assessing the care environment, participating in rounds, again, compliance monitoring and data collection and communication, but starting to be more independent rather than under the direction of a senior IP. And at this point, someone, as they're beginning to learn the basics of infection control, may want to get the associate IPC certification as one of the steps. It's not required, but it could be something that's helpful. It wasn't around at the time that I was developing, but if I were doing this now, I might want to go that route in order to practice the CIC test. And now we arrive at the proficient infection prevention, and this is an infection preventionist, and this is a professional who demonstrates proficiency through certification, applies knowledge and experience to the practice where they're assigned, and then beginning to learn advanced concepts. I like people to think about the CIC certification as entry level of proficiency, and your skill and learning doesn't stop there, it continues, but it is an incredibly important touchstone on the way of expertise. So example competencies for a proficient IP is, a subject matter expert, someone who's able to achieve certification, regardless of whether it's CIC or a long-term CIP, being able to apply those epidemiologic principles, beginning to lead interdisciplinary groups in improvement projects, using and evaluating data, and then making appropriate recommendations based on what that data says is happening, creating education programs, supporting your stewardship for antibiotics. Being an advocate now becomes really important, making sure that you're advocating for safe practices, and then, excuse me, participating actively in research and quality improvement projects. And now we come to an infection prevention leader. So a leader demonstrates their knowledge and expertise through formal leadership, a formal leadership role. They demonstrate they can manage and guide the program as it is developing, and displayed the facility's achievement and being able to maintain those IPC program goals. Some examples, competencies here, these are leaders now. So they're going to lead the team in developing and aligning the program with the organization's strategic plan. They're going to lead the team in surveillance and risk management, doing that data analysis and collection, and then implementing improvements in care or facilitating the improvements in care to reduce infections. Professional stewardship is becoming even more important here as an example to others that they lead, and evaluating and incorporating research into practice at the institution. Now we come to the executive IP, and these IPs have operational oversight and strategic direction over their program. These would probably be larger organizations. They're going to want to align the IP program or programs, depending on, whether or not it's a huge organization with multiple, regions that are managed. And they're going to want to align those with the organization's mission and vision. There are some example competencies. And by the way, these example competencies are much more detailed in that advancement guide. So as you become familiar with that, there's much more detail to these competencies. So their development and implementing their leadership by, number one, establishing a vision for the program. So you can see as we've moved along this path, we're actually moving a little bit further and further away from the bedside and the frontline folks to influence how a program actually lays out. So here we're going to establish a vision. We're going to implement proactive and responsive approaches to the IPC program, including the risks that are identified. They're going to be working to put in systems that improve care. They're going to, monitor that professional stewardship on their team and ensure accountability. And then, again, incorporating research into practice. Oops, sorry. So now I want to talk about a career path. So here, APIC lays out 3 different paths. The one on the left is healthcare, the center one is public health, and the one on the right is industry. And the career path is really a formal series of steps and advancement through the course of your career. And that can happen in any one of these streams, or as it shows here, you can cross. And as I did, I was an acute care IPC systems nurse for the majority of my career and moved into public health during the COVID pandemic and have decided to stay here. But some IPs stay in healthcare all their entire career. And as we move around along this career path, we increase our knowledge, skill, and responsibility within that path. And our impact and it impacts our job satisfaction, our retention or staying in the career, recruiting others, as well as impacting our professional development. Sometimes we move, an IP might move into public health, as I mentioned, I did, which has a broader influence of being able to work outside of a facility to support others who are doing the job in the healthcare setting. And then also in industry. So there are a lot of infection prevention opportunities for instance, being an infection prevention practitioner for a company that does third-party reprocessing or sterilization and disinfection activities, or becoming an infection preventionist for industry who are creating new patient care devices that you can go out and teach providers in the hospital about how to use these safely. The other thing that's seen a lot of growth in the last number of years is infection preventionists in education, in sport, and also in entertainment. I contemplated taking a position during the pandemic for a while on a movie set where they were hiring an IP who would monitor and manage infection prevention while the movie was being shot during the pandemic. So there's there's a lot of different ways you can go with this besides, being a hospital IP, although I loved that for 27 years. So then there's the career ladder. And again, this is formal steps and advancement through those IP career stages where we increase our knowledge, increase our skill and responsibility. And as we become more and more competent at what we do, we become more satisfied. We want to stay in, we want to encourage others to come in and continue to develop. And this can vary a lot depending on the setting where you are. I experienced a little bit more of that upward mobility in the acute hospital setting than I have so far seen in public health. And it might be even more limited, I think, in industry because it's more the function that they're looking for rather than vision. But that's what the career ladder is. And yeah, so if you want to get where you want to go, there are some things that we can suggest. So again, being future oriented. I like to say plan your work and work your plan. So, use the tool that's in the guide. Write down your professional development plan and be as specific as you can, but know that you're going to want to adjust it over time as you learn more and more about what you do and how you do it. Include those opportunities from the self-assessments and goals in that development plan. Complete a career stage competency assessments, and really importantly, begin now, especially if you're early on the path, the infection prevention path. Keep track of what your goals are. Every new skill and experience that you have, put it on your CV. Keep a track. You can always take it off, but you keep track of where you're going. And it's also helpful to look back and say, oh, look at what I've accomplished over the years. Keep track of your certifications, your CIC, your long-term CIP. If you get a quality certification from NAHQ, food handling certificate, whatever that is. Um, and then make sure you have those important membership, those organizational memberships, whether it's APIC, SHE, or both, Infectious Disease Society of America, AORN, whatever it is that you're focused on, get those memberships and maintain them. They're very valuable. And then even keep a record of your community activities. I still have on my CV that I had, I led a medical team to Haiti a few times, and that helps to document the meaning of those 6 competency domains in your professional development. I want to say a little bit here about time management. This was something I had trouble with early on because, and some might say, Bailey might say, I still do, but we can get so caught up in the doing of what we're doing that we lose track of our professional development. And I have a picture of the saw here from a perspective of sharpening the saw. And it's really important that you carve out and have protected time to participate in those things that will make you a better IP. So prioritize time for local APIC chapter meetings. Request time with your leadership to build skill. And one of the most valuable things I did early on was I spent 3 days in the hospital lab on the micro bench, and a little bit of time in serology, where I really learned the flow of organisms through the lab and why specimens might take longer when they were submitted on a Thursday, and because there's very practical things that happen. And then also learning that there are certain organisms that grow quickly, certain ones that grow slowly. So it really was very enriching. The other thing I did was I spent several days in sterile processing. Actually, I think it was 2, thinking back. And I went in, shadowed or worked on every stage in sterile processing, and it has served me very well. And having them teach me what it was that was expected was incredibly helpful long term. And same thing with the lab, they taught me. If you're responsible for the OR, spend time in the operating room, talk to the nurses, get a copy of the AORN guideline, and then also take advantage of other experienced IPs and shadow them. Even if they're outside of your facility, it can be extremely helpful and a wonderful learning activity. And if you're more experienced, shadow and mentor those less experienced IPs. Rising water lifts all boats, right? Request from your leadership to participate in conferences. They're very important, from learning what's coming in, what's new, and also that networking. A lot of the important IPs I go to with questions are folks that I met over the years at APIC. The other thing that I did, and was so valuable and important, I think it was for really the first 2 years, was every Friday afternoon for 4 hours, I protected my afternoon, and for 2 years. And during the week, if there was something that I was weak on, I would pull an article and I would put it in the pile, or I would flag someplace in a book that I wanted to go back and review, so that on that Friday afternoon, that time was dedicated to me sharpening my blade, and improving what it was, or building on what it was that I knew or thought I knew. This is kind of targeting the infection preventionists with long-term care. And a lot of this might be because I'm unfamiliar with your position description. But this is a PD that came from SPICE at the University of North Carolina. And I would look at this. I'm going to share the link, but it's really important that your job description reflects what it is that you actually do. And here, I highlighted some of those important words that are inherently part woven into our practice. And I would suggest that you look at this document from UNC and compare it against your job description or position description. And if it doesn't meet, your PD doesn't describe what you're actually doing, ask to have it revised, because it's really part of those things that we bring forward in our advancement. So it's very helpful. And it may be helpful for you in acute care as well. But I was thinking specifically of long-term care when I threw this up here. I'm just going to say a bit about finding a mentor. So mentor relationships can either be formal or informal. I've had several very important mentors in my career, and all of them have been informal. And I've selected them. And those selections were largely because they had something that I wanted to acquire in how they worked or learn from, and were strong at something that I wasn't. So they were very helpful to me in my growth. So, these mentor relationships are communication and relationship based. Two of the people, one was my first IP mentor, and the other was a quality manager that I worked under a little later in my career. And both of them were extremely important to me from the content piece of it, because they had content expertise. They were amazing advisors. They were kind of my counselors. I'd go in and cry in their office when things didn't go well. And, they guided me as I grew in my job, in supporting that professional expertise. So, having a mentor is really important. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone. You can also ask your organization to formally put you into a mentorship program. I don't know a lot about those because I haven't done them, but they're equally valuable. But having an opportunity to choose your mentor within that structure would also be helpful. So it's a good personality fit. So the influencer. So I mentioned C-suite familiarity and social capital in here. Part of what, especially the quality manager that I worked for, part of what she did for me was she taught me that the people I thought were the influencers within the organization weren't always who I thought they were. So she could say to me, that's probably not the best person to talk to, even though they're the head of housekeeping. This is the person that actually really, has the influence over that decision. So having that lead is really helpful. And then the other piece of that they can do, if they're well placed and respected within the organization, they basically can give you a stamp of approval to other leaders within the organization and essentially say, hey, look, I work with her. She knows what she's talking, or he knows what he's talking about. And that social capital can also break down walls for you. So that's my bit about mentorship. If you're newer, these self-paced learning and training opportunities are very good quality. One is the CDC Strive program, and the other, which is targeted more for long-term care, is the TRAIN program, nursing home IP training. So APIC, look, I can't brag enough about APIC. They have tremendous online resources, many of which are free, with the webinars, annual conferences, both local and national. I strongly encourage you to go to your local APIC meeting. And if you can, once every other year, or, sharing it amongst your team, because it can be expensive for an organization to go to those national conferences. SHE is also, if you're into research and much more mind heavy, research heavy stuff, SHE is also good. The 4-day epi intensive training was what I did early on in my career, and they were all associated with conference. So I would go to conference a few days early. Now they have these epi intensives that are virtual, so you can participate in them and not have to travel. And they're a great way of jumpstarting your career and really putting you a bit more on a fast track for proficiency. There's also the APIC's long-term care IP essentials training, and there are several webinars. I've listened to a couple recently, several webinars that are free on the APIC education website. One of the other things I really want to pitch is that it's really important, especially if you are at that proficient stage and really looking more to move towards expert, is to really know where these relevant guidance documents are so that you can go directly to the source. Because infection prevention is rarely black or white. There's always these shades of gray, so that you have to sometimes tweak things. It may not be perfect. And these resources are really how you help get there. So the bloodborne pathogens rule from OSHA, the respiratory protection guidance from OSHA are two important laws that every organization really should be following. Then the CDC guidelines, HICPAC guidelines, I call them kind of my Bible. I'm old school, so I have them printed off and I pull them frequently because they really have all of it. Environment of care, CLABSI, CAUTI prevention, healthcare, infection control. So be familiar with those if you haven't already. The other thing, I had a conversation with someone before I went on vacation about some challenges that they were having, and I completely missed this for him. But when you bump up against someone who's resistant to what seems to be common sense in infection prevention, and you can't quite find where it is in writing, it can be really helpful to go back to their practice standards. For instance, this was related to anesthesia. I don't have the Anesthesia Society of America's guidelines, but they publish them. So you can then go to anesthesia guidelines and say, hey, this is what your own organization says you should be doing. And that can carry a lot of weight for them professionally, just like the APIC, IDSA, SHE position papers do for us. So I was able early on, mine is dated 2013, but I went online and I got a used copy of the AORN manual for much less than what it would cost. These can be very expensive. The ANSI standards, I think, are like $750. So, it's hard to get our hands on some of these. But you can also go to the head of your GI program and say, hey, can I borrow your endoscopy guidelines? And that can be a really helpful way for you to drill down into some of the detail that may not be readily available to you through CDC and HICPAC. So in summary, these are some of the recommended resources that I'm going to send to you: the self-assessment tool, the competency model, and the roadmap. That's all I have for you today. And I want to open it up. We'll stop the recording. See if I can do this.